Today we have the great honor of being joined by the former New Mexico governor and Libertarian candidate for President Joe Johnson. Governor, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Cheers, cheers. So the first question that I want to ask is, why did you decide you've been a successful businessman, you're a successful athlete, you've been a two-term governor, why decide to run for governor now, or for president now of all times?
Well, I really think the country is in deep trouble. I think we're bankrupt. That's the bad news. I think the good news is that we can fix it, but we've got to have a resolve to balance the federal budget. And I happen to be running as a libertarian right now because I think the Libertarian Party embraces the best of both parties. The notion that most people in this country are fiscally conservative and socially tolerant. And I think that that's really what the Libertarian Party embraces. So you got to be able to identify what the problems are. I think you've got to be able to identify what the solutions that go along with those problems are. And then I think you've got to have a resume to suggest that you'll doggedly pursue addressing those problems and the solutions that go along with them. I happen to think I've got them all, so here I am.
Thank you for that, sir. The next question I have is, you obviously were lifelong, or at least professionally a lifelong Republican. You started out in the Republican primary process. Do you want to speak for a moment about why you decided to run as a Libertarian instead of staying with the Republican primary?
I think that for the most part, I'm delivering the same message as Ron Paul, and I think that it's that when the message of liberty and freedom is understood, I really think that it does identify what the problems are in this country. I think it identifies the solutions that go along with it. I don't think Ron Paul is going to win the Republican nomination. So when that comes to an end, where does this message go? Well, I'd like to be the person that carries this message forward because it is so important. And I think as human beings, when we hear the same message coming from a couple of different sources rather than just one, it resonates a little bit more. There's a better understanding of what's being said. So in the context of being a messenger, I'm hoping that I'm able to make the message more understood.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned liberty a few times, and it's an important part of your message. The funny thing about this year's primary process is a lot of candidates have been referring to President Reagan, his policies. He individually, though, was a pretty strong defender of liberty. And it seems like a lot of your counterparts, the Republican Party, are advocating policies that are a little stricter when it comes to civil liberties. Can you give us some of your opinions and some of your beliefs when it comes to civil liberties?
Well, I really would like to see a repeal of the Patriot Act. I really would never have established the Department of Homeland Security. I think it's terribly redundant. And if you take a look at civil liberties, a woman's right to choose, marriage equality, it is a constitutionally guaranteed right. These are issues that come under the heading of civil liberties. The notion that government should not be concerning itself with decisions that you and I as individuals should be making, not the government. ACLU issued a report card. ACLU, group dedicated to civil liberties, issued a report card on all the presidential candidates a couple of months ago. And Newt Gingrich had 4 liberty torches out of a possible 24. Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney had 0 liberty torches out of a possible 24. President Obama had 16 out of a possible 24. Ron Paul had 18 out of a possible 24. And I had 21 out of 24. I had the high score. So I'm proud of the fact that the American Civil Liberties Association acknowledged me as perhaps the best presidential candidate with regard to civil liberties and how that really equates to our daily lives.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions now. A quick follow-up on your previous point. Why do you think that the party that you, the Republican Party, the party you belonged to for so long. Um, why do you think some of your counterparts believe in small government and yet still seem to have fixations too strong, or still seem to be bent on advocating lifestyle choices? And in other words, why do you think there's a contradiction between the notion of small government and yet wanting government to interfere in private matters?
Well, I think there is a contradiction there, and it's a contradiction that I've never been able to defend. And for me, changing parties, the Libertarian Party really is coming out of the closet. I just think the Libertarian Party embraces the best of both parties. I think that for the most part, Republicans have been known to be pretty good on the checkbook, although they're not so good right now of late. And I think for the most part, Democrats are pretty good when it comes to civil liberties, but of late, not so good. So how about taking the Libertarian Party, which is good, period, in both of those categories, balancing the checkbook and civil liberties.
Next question I have goes to some of your economic and tax policies. You said that a lot of your counterparts in both parties seem intent on cutting spending locally while expanding or increasing spending internationally. How would you reallocate funds? How would you plan to reduce taxes and reduce deficit?
Well, I'm making three promises as President of the United States. The first promise, I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in 2013. Now, that's not promising a balanced budget because Congress is going to have to go along with it. But I'm going to submit a document that is going to detail a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending now, which essentially eliminates the deficit. I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. So I will essentially be vetoing everything. Even if Congress overrides the veto, which they will end up having to do, I suggest to you that in that scenario, spending will be less than any other scenario that we could possibly come up with. Last, I am promising to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system. Income tax, corporate tax, tax withholdings from your payroll check, the IRS, and replace it with the fair tax, which is a consumption tax, which ends up to be cost neutral over a very short amount of time. It's really the answer when it comes to making American goods and services competitive for export. It's the answer to China. And it's really the answer when it comes to jobs. Because if in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know under what circumstance the private sector will create tens of millions of jobs. I think the fair tax reboots the American economy for the next 100 years. And I say 100 years because politicians will get around to screwing it up soon. There is nothing I want to see the government fix amongst the people. When you hear talk of net neutrality, you hear talk about equal access to the internet, when in reality I think probably end up being the opposite. So government doesn't need to fix a thing on the Well, I support legalizing marijuana. Let's control it. Let's regulate it. Let's tax it. We can't continue to arrest 900,000 people a year on marijuana-related charges. 50% of Americans right now support legalizing marijuana. The number has never been that high. The reason that the number is that high is that people are talking about this issue. And that's terrific. The more people talk about it, the more people come to recognize that, look, it's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get smoking pot, doing no harm to anyone arguably other than yourself, should that be criminal? No, I don't think that that should be criminal. I think it's interesting that Colorado has a ballot initiative that I think has a really good chance of passing this November. The initiative is called Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. And I think that makes a whole lot of sense.
A large state like that is a sign of things that come nationwide. Obviously, I think there's considered how do you get that to say it's one state versus like the rest of Colorado.
No, I don't. I think right now one state votes to legalize marijuana, that would be a domino where all the other states follow. My understanding is that New York State, its prohibition of alcohol, told the federal government we are no longer going to enforce